This is the Solid Signal podcast for the week of May 15th, 2023. And the question this week is a simple one. Is satellite TV over and done with? Has its time passed? Let's look at the evidence. First of all, I think that we can't ignore the fact that both DirecTV and Dish have reported subscriber losses that in fact seem to be fairly steep. It doesn't necessarily mean that they have lost revenue, but obviously they're taking in less money because they have fewer subscribers. They may be offsetting this in different ways. But then on the other hand, we have to look at customer sentiment. The people who have satellite TV, are they still happy with it? Are they still intending to continue with it? And if not, why not? And if so, why so? There's really one more bit to this that I will get to a little bit closer to the end of this podcast, and that's what the companies themselves are saying internally. So let's kind of dive right in. Satellite television, as well as all traditional pay television, had a pretty bad quarter this last quarter. And that's something you just cannot deny it. It's impossible to say that they had a good quarter. This is just the latest in a series of either low growth or losing quarters for all of the major pay TV providers. And the answer is pretty simple. People are moving to streaming. That's where a lot of the excitement is. They like the on-demand model more than the live TV model. That's what we're being told. And pay TV is just something that, your mom or your grandma has, and that it's never going to really reach up to the heights that it was, 10 years ago. And that's the story. It's a shrinking market. It's a mature market, and it's never, ever going to grow again. That's what the naysayers would like to have you hear. But we're not seeing the evidence of it. Yes, we are seeing subscriber losses, and we are seeing sustained subscriber losses. But what we are not seeing is a decrease in average revenue per user, which means that the typical person is spending just as much as they ever did. And the people who are churning out, and that's the industry term for it, by the way, the people who are churning out tend to be the people who were not 100% committed to it in the first place, who are in lower price packages. And these customers, while valuable to both DirecTV and Dish, tend to have the highest cost of acquisition. It costs a lot to get them. And the retention rate is low. And yet, at the same time, it takes a lot of equipment, a lot of free stuff just to get them on board. So I'm not saying, good riddance or anything like that, but I think that if you look at the way the numbers are structured, it's not the customers who are bringing the highest value to these satellite TV companies that are going, it's the ones who are bringing the lowest value. And that's a really important thing to look at when you look at the long-term survivability of these companies. And it's funny to even have to say, will these companies survive? Because, I think back 10 or 15 years ago, these companies were at the top of the world. But of course, things change. Streaming has come in, and it has become a major factor in the way that people watch television. I know that I stream just as much as anybody else, and I don't deny that. So let's look at kind of the next bit of it, which is why. Why are people leaving traditional pay television? And the answer is obvious. It's the cost and value equation. When the cost gets up to a certain point, it becomes very hard for the average person to justify the value. It's not a matter necessarily of is the economy good or is the economy bad. But if you're paying $120 a month just to get, your kind of basic channels, then you're going to be looking at that bill every month and you're going to be wondering if it's worth it. Now, personally, I do think it is worth it. I think that you get an awful lot of value out of traditional pay television. At least I do. But I also respect that some people are going to feel like they don't, like they're not getting everything that they want out of it, that it's not providing them enough entertainment as time goes on. I wonder though. I wonder if the writer's strike will have an impact on people's perceptions. Because if you really think about it, when we have a writer's strike right now, and what that means is there's less new television coming into the summer when at a time when there was going to be less new television anyway. This means people are going to be looking back on existing stuff. They're going to be mining their old catalogs for things that they want to see again. And satellite television is a great place to find that. So I really tend to think the value, the perceived value, is going to go up as a result of the writer's strike, which may not be exactly what the writers had in mind. But why are costs so high? I mean, we're talking about mature companies who have mature satellite fleets. Why does it cost so much to operate? Well, a lot of the money that comes in goes straight back out the door to content providers. There are a few national ones that are really big that we think of. Disney, ABC, ESPN is one of them. Discovery, Time Warner, or which is now known as Warner Brothers Discovery, is another. And yes, a lot of money is paid to these companies specifically just to keep their channels on the air. But there are even bigger providers that are really the reason for these cost increases. And you've never heard their names, or if you have, you're ahead of the curve. You see, a long time ago, when I was first learning about the broadcast business, there was a rule that said that no company could own more than, I think it was 5 television stations. Well, that rule got changed. And this isn't a show about politics, but it was changed as a result of some pressure in Congress to allow pretty much unlimited ownership of TV stations. And believe me, there are a few companies out there, for example, Sinclair Broadcast Group and Nexstar, and to a lesser extent Tribune, that own a massive number of local television stations. And they are the ones that are exerting this huge amount of pressure on satellite TV companies to try to keep their revenue flows going, because they know that local television is the one that's suffering the most, and they rely more and more on fees from cable companies and satellite companies and less on commercials. If you think that your local TV, even your network TV, is subsidized by commercials, chances are it isn't. In fact, it's subsidized by you paying your pay TV company for service, and then that money goes straight into the pockets of these big owners. Like I said, Sinclair Broadcast Group, Nexstar, and Tribune are the ones that come to mind. But this is the thing that needs to get under control. Dish has done a little bit of this work because they do let people opt out of local channels, and it saves the customer usually about $10 a month. But I'm willing to bet that it costs a lot more than $10 a month in a lot of these markets just to keep local channels going. And that's what Dish is offering for savings, because it's kind of a median. It's what they feel like they can get away with, or what is fair to the marketplace is a better way of putting that. But local channels cost an awful lot of money. And I'm not saying they shouldn't. I'm not saying we should get rid of local channels. I'm saying that these large providers should look at serving their constituencies and not just padding their pocketbooks. There is a real, genuine need for local television, even on pay TV, even on streaming. And I'm not saying it should be a charity or it should be nationalized like it is in other countries. What I'm saying is that there is room in the budget to produce good local television, to have great local TV stations, and yet at the same time not be bankrupting, the average person who is just trying to watch TV. It's got to stop. It's got to kind of improve. And that's where I place a lot of this blame, is on the local broadcasters and these who are owned by these big conglomerates. At least that's kind of the way I see it. Now, the other piece of this is what these companies are telling their own dealers. You are listening to the Solid Signal podcast, so you probably know that both DirecTV and Dish operate local dealerships all across the country. Sure, you can call their national call center, but you're probably not going to get the same level of service that you'd get from working with somebody who's in your backyard or working with a company like SolidSignal.com, who sponsors this podcast. As a DirecTV and Dish dealer, they can give you quality service that you cannot get from the call centers that you get if you call DirecTV and Dish. And so both companies just finished their yearly conventions, and I want to say this is the first time in several years that both have been in person. These shows were similar in one particular way, and that was that the message was clear. Satellite TV is here and it's not going anywhere. You know, a couple of years ago, there was a feeling, especially from AT&T, the then owner of DirecTV, that they were trying to transition everyone off satellite and toward a streaming model. That did not work. I mean, yes, there's DirecTV for internet, which is a great value, but it isn't getting the uptake that I think AT&T thought it was going to. Same thing, Dish has Sling, and they're not necessarily getting the uptake that they may have at first envisioned. Both companies are now saying satellite is a key part of what they do and who they do it for. DirecTV has a satellite at its 101 location. It's only about 2 years old, and this satellite could be operating for 15 more years at least. And that satellite just by itself is enough to carry about 2/3 of the channels that the company needs to put out. I mean, it's not enough if you count all of the pay-per-views and all the sports packages and all that stuff. But that one satellite could handle a lot of capacity if the company needed to do it. More importantly, they have a robust satellite fleet at their 99 and 103 locations that are practically brand new and doing very well. And the company is all set up for success way out to 2030 and 2035 and beyond. And I want to say that I'm not saying that beyond that is somebody else's problem, but I mean, there's only so far out that you really can plan for this stuff. And more importantly, I think Dish made a great announcement at their dealer meeting. They say that they are going to, for the very first time in a long time, I think it's been over a decade, they will be launching a new satellite they're calling EchoStar 25. And this is going to allow them to shore up their fleet for another 10 to 15 years. These companies are serious and they're in it for the long haul. And I hope that makes you feel better about you being in it for the long haul, because peer pressure, I know, and anxiety plays a big part in these sort of things. You're like, okay, do I want to keep, working with a company if I don't think they're going to be around? The good thing is that you can say satellite TV is going to be around for a long time. The value proposition is only going to improve. I think the days of double-digit per year cost increases are long gone, and I think that consolidation and cost savings are going to be the order of the day. I don't think that you'll ever see costs go down because there's inflation, all that stuff. But I think the value equation will continue to get better. Costs will not rise as much as they have in the past, and it's just going to be a good deal for everybody. But then again, you probably know that. You're probably a satellite TV subscriber, and that's why you're listening to the Solid Signal podcast, and I appreciate you. At any rate, that'll do it for this week's Solid Signal podcast. Like and subscribe. Makes me look good to my bosses. Leave a comment anywhere that you receive this podcast. And do me a favor and shop at solidsignal.com. Really great folks. Keep the lights on here at the podcast and pay my salary. And honestly, I sure do appreciate it. That's it for me for this week. Have a great one.